Which means this whole, as I heard from you, the shotgun or the machine gun approach, right? The machine gun approach. Yeah. So I will apologize, but I'll also say that I'm doing it because of a reason. I can talk a little slower. I'm not always spastic. I mean, Sarah has a really interesting little notebook because she's gone through and she's written every single little note that is important to her. Among other things, convenience is alluring to people, right? An ethnobotanist studies the relationship between people and plants. And what other ones do you have in there, Sarah?
We're fighting a war with the weeds.
Yeah, fighting a war that we're not going to win because...
Reattached to the earth.
Yeah. Pretty impressive. And then I have a group of 4 who need to get the award for really putting a lot of effort into coming here. I think I didn't put as much effort as you. They came from Bristol. Huntley, George, and Joe, who came 160 miles by bicycle. And he broke his hand. I have Kay, who's never had her picture on social media, and she's about ready to lose that virginity, she says, because she would take a picture with me. Unbelievable. And then there's somebody from Kanaki, Illinois. This is Kay. Jane. Excuse me, Jane. Yeah, you're from the States then. So we have one other American here. Wow. And she lived in Cornfields too when she was a kid. So a lot of awful interesting perceptions. People who've asked me what they can do. I think there's a girl out here named Beth. And you are talking because you are giving a rehabilitation, it sounds like, to adults. Were you filmmakers?
No, it was autism.
Autism. So they're like me. Yeah, autistic people. Yeah, and it's provable. You can help people with plants. Okay, let's get started. This is the central part. We're going to go through it, and you're going to see so many wonderful things. Okay, where is that coming from? Right here. Okay, so this is one of those edible agaves. Connie has also asked me to try to focus on useful things for your endeavors as gardeners in the UK. And with that being a request of Tom, I'm certainly going to acknowledge it, and I'm going to try to point out things that would be interesting. But a part of the reason that I gave you that piece of paper that they printed out is to give you my contacts. So if you have personal questions or you want to delve into this more, I can lead you in certain ways or connect you with people who can really, make that exciting. So this is agave havardiana. They weigh about 150 pounds when they get this big, and they were harvested by the Indians of the American Southwest to roast like giant artichoke hearts. And we were harvesting this because when they're just about ready to burst into flower, they're monocarpic, which means they bloom one time. They give it all one big burst of shoot. They have accumulated over their years of growth the greatest amount of sugars, which then are translated into that great flower stalk, which is their next generation. Plants growing all over the world, people then address the situation of climate change. And this is one of the arguments. One of the gentlemen who studied biology said that in his courses, part of the preferential treatment given to biotechnology is salvation factor, how we're going to save the world and feed a hungry world. So part of the question then to me about the hungry world is why would we be trying to orchestrate and tweak corn stalks, which aren't growing in environments like this, to grow in environments like this if nature already has endowed us with a great number of plants that do. And here I am at 5,000 meters almost, 4,600, 4,700 meters along the Chilean-Bolivian border in the Atacama Desert, and this cactus, which is called Mequinopsis boliviana, produces edible fruit. And you see it looks like a lunar landscape. This right here is a cactus which grows in the Baja California peninsula. It's a columnar cactus which decided to lay down. So it grows on the ground, and it happens to have in the picture my son Dimitri, who is harvesting one of the fruits, which looked like this if the picture was coordinated properly. Next. This right here. So when we talk about feeding a hungry world because of climate change, we naturally assume that it's going to be hotter, drier, wetter, colder, or this or that, and all the crops that we talk about have to be adapted to those crops and climates that have been changing. Well, as it turns out, they did a white paper study on the desert flora of the Sonora Desert. And they wanted to ask the question, how are they tolerating, how are they coping with ever hotter conditions? And to the shock and chagrin of the scientists, they were doing just fine. Now, it's going to have to really get a lot hotter in order to stifle the cacti, because in fact, as the solar radiation hits the surface of the Sonora Desert, it gets up to 75 degrees Celsius. So they're already tolerant of a lot of heat, and they've adapted over the millions of years to do so. So why don't we look at nature? And this is the point which is very important to us about domestication. Domestication is not just something that took 10,000 years to happen. It's fast-tracked, because after all, I told you that I'm not against new things. I'm against things that are stupid new things. I'm against things that don't have proper rhyme or reason. And if an expert tells me how to do something, before I qualify he or she as an expert, I first ask the questions that are necessary of an inquiring mind to relay it and compare it to the data that I have, to ask more philosophical questions to see if they're really telling me something that's important. Like if a obese, unhealthy, hacking doctor tells me how to take care of myself, I have to ask what that really means. Now, if I have a cut and my finger is hanging, I'm not going to ask so many questions, please sew it up. But if he's giving me an idea about how to live, I'm going to ask if he is a symbol of health and what that means. So there's a little bit of relationship that has to go to the questions. So the people who are all running around saying how they're going to feed the world, well, we need to ask if they really are feeding the world. You know, Illinois, Jane, is a food-producing state. They claim to be the bread basket of the world. But your neighbor next door, Iowa, also claims to be one of the bread baskets of the world. Now they really aren't a bread basket. They just happen to be a corn-producing state that imports 85% of their food. So if this is the future of food, we're really something. 85% of their food is imported, and yet Monsanto claims that this is the only way to feed a hungry world. The domestication process is long and hard, or is it? It happens to be that there is a wonderful floriculture, horticultural example of domestication, and it isn't much farther than across the channel, looking at Holland and Belgium. The Dutch, especially, are experts at finding plants growing in jungles or in different parts of the world and fast-tracking them into domestication. What does that mean? Let's say the caladium. How many of you are gardeners familiar with caladiums? The colorful leaves that are in the philodendron and aroid family that grow up from a corm, this kind of bulb. Not less than 100 years ago, they were just wild plants. Over the years, people grew them here and there, but then about 25, 35 years ago, the British were buying so many of them, the Americans were buying so many of them, that the Dutch started really ramping up the breeding programs and selection, such that now there's a panoply of colors that almost challenges the rainbow. They don't have blue and greens yet in the same way, but they have a lot of color. So they've taken wild plants, selected for traits, bred them, and domesticated them. That's my simple distillation of the fast-track domestication. Another way you can do it, thanks to modern technologies, is by genetically marking traits and then trying to look at those traits and combine them in traditional breeding programs, because breeding is really important. Now with the cacti, there happens to be around 2,000 species of cacti. All of them produce edible fruit. Not all of it is palatable, but it is all edible. And in fact, they will become, as I contend, the orchards of the desert future, even though to this day they haven't been really appreciated for that potential. Here's a few more of them, I think. Okay, so this is pharaoh cactus, which is a big barrel cactus, and that's one of its fruits. It's lemony tasting. And this right here is a tree which grows in the deserts of Oaxaca. How deserty is Oaxaca? It gets less than 4 inches of rain a year, and trees grow there. So part of the big challenge about desertification, part of the big challenge about a so-called climate-changing world is just the reality that we've cut down a lot of the trees. Remember the story about walking on someone's face or walking down the sidewalk? We are chopping trees down. And by chopping trees down, we're stupid because trees are part of resilient nature. They protect us, they give us shade, they give us resources, they give us material. And every time we cut down a tree, we should plant 2 more. So recently I was in India, and it's dry season at that time. And I flew from Delhi down to Bangalore, which is about a 2.5-hour flight. It turns out that as I was flying over it, it was hazen, it was torpid, hot as can be, and as I looked down at the barren earth, it only dawned on me that part of this so-called climate change is just a transient situation because there's no trees. If you take that same area and plant trees on it, the temperature would probably go down as much as 10 to 15 or 20 degrees, and that is not completely ludicrous, it's reality. I was in the Andaman Islands, which are a far-flung colony of India along the Burmese border in the sea of the Andaman Sea, and we were in this one area and it was treeless, and it was just horrible. Heat, humidity, unbearable. And then we drove into an area in a convoy where the Jarwa people live. And why is that important? Because the Jarwa are indigenous people who they don't really know where they came from, who have a forest preserve, and when you enter their paradise, as it appears, the temperatures come down 10 or 15 degrees. Unbelievable. In the town of Singapore, part of the inspiration of that great leader was to plant trees such that, for those of you who have visited, you'll notice that the trees that canopy the streets are cutting down the sun, bringing shade and bringing a relief from otherwise unbearable conditions. You only have to walk to India town where there are no trees to realize and appreciate what a tree can do to make the world better. Desertification, the spread of deserts are man-made in many instances. We can't change the big things. You remember that American comedian who was caustic, George Carlin? He had a particular presentation about man saving the earth. It was like, oh, can he really? We can't save the earth, but we can certainly ameliorate the conditions of life where we live. So, trees like that would suffice. People say, well, what about all those important things that you need to eat? Not just greens, but how about some protein and carbohydrates? Well, this plant is in the squash family. Scientific name, just for the reference, is Cucurbita fetidissima. The evil-smelling cucurbit is what it basically transfers. It has so much cucurbitacin, which is a chemical which it emits to scare away cucumber beetles, that it's almost bulletproof. And what it produces is a terribly bitter fruit. But within that bitter fruit are the prize of nutrition that were sought out by the American desert Indians. They're seeds, and once you wash away the bitterness of the pulp, the seeds have up to 20% protein and have lots of carbohydrate and oil, and they're rich source of nutrients. Why don't we plant fields of this bulletproof perennial plant in the desert to produce food? Well, it's because that's how we did things rather than that's how we should do things. This right here is the baobab. This is Adansonia zaba. It's a forest of southwestern Madagascar. There you see me, you see how big it is. The guy who was the warden of this small national park told me that people, the Chinese come here and cry when they see the trees. And I thought about it, and I said, the Chinese would come and cut it down. No, I wasn't being cynical. It was the Japanese, and after discussing it further with him, I was being rude about the Chinese, but in fact, the Japanese come here and they see these trees and they burst into tears because they're just so overwhelmingly spectacular.
Joe,
in their environment.
Do you know the fatty about them?
Excuse me?
The fatty? So in Madagascar, it's like a myth. And
Yeah, well, the fatty is no one
people
cuts down a baobab tree, first of all. And the second thing is that it's the spiritual oasis of souls, right?
Yeah, and they think that the gods got angry at them, so the gods ripped their trees out and tipped them upside down, turned them back in, so the top of it looks like the roots. Yeah.
They're pretty spectacular, and so they'll harvest the fruits, and these are revered. They don't chop them down, but I have other ones where they have the little indents so they can climb up the tree like a ladder.
Yeah.
There's a beetle with the fruit of Adansonia digitata, which is the baobab tree growing in a botanical garden in Hawaii. And this is an interesting scene from the deserts of Chile in San Pedro Atacama Desert. The acacia trees, in this case Prosopis chilensis or Prosopis alba, there's two species, produce these mesquite beans which have a sugary, dry, farinaceous, flour-like powder that can be ground out of them, that can be used in cakes mixed with flour, and it's extraordinarily nutritious and tasty. This right here is in the Namibian desert. This is a plant in the cucumber, squash, and watermelon family called Acanthocecus horridus. It has no leaves but only spines. So I mean, we'll just go through all this. There's the fruit right there. Absolutely amazing. This is the two species, horridus and dinialis. And then here I am in the deserts of Oman with a plant which is called Karaluma. It's an edible succulent. And this is really cool. So I'm with the San people in Botswana, and we're going on a little food gathering thing. And so this vine looks like a cucumber vine, but what it makes is a carrot-like root that's white and delicious and crunchy and sweet. And it's in a cucumber family. And then these are various roots which were dug out of the desert. So and then they were digging out these big. It's possible this right here is probably a food for the future for millions of people. It's called the marama bean. It will grow in very, very hot, dry deserts. It'll wait for water. If you saw the movie that was made in America called The Gods Must Be Crazy, where the Coke bottle falls out of the plane and they think it's a holy object, and then they were digging out these big tubers, that's the tuber of the marama bean, this one right here. That's a young one, maybe 3 years old. Once they get mature, they can weigh up to 300 or 400 pounds. So the thing is, they get very, very big, and they are water receptacles, as you would say, for the plant, which means the plant can go for 3 or 4 or 5 years without water at that stage of development. It produces a macadamia-sized nut, and the young tuber, which is right here as a young one, is very tender and tastes almost identical to the fleshy part of an artichoke heart. So these are all edible tubers, I mean, from the wild. And all of these can be domesticated, and they grow in very repressive environments. This is along the border of Jericho in the Sinai Desert with date selections. This is a very resilient thing, and I was corrected just 2 days ago, or was it yesterday, the day before? I was corrected. I was in a little town in Holland at a herbarium, and I was giving a talk to some rather illustrious people, and I had assumed that this was salt. It still could be salt. But the one person pointed out that it may have been natrium or borax rather than salt. But up until then, I had claimed that this, because I did not taste it, that was my faux pas. Should have tasted it, then I could have claimed it was really, really salt. But this is in the Dankali Depression, showing a palm which produces an edible nut, growing in one of the harshest parts of the world. It was about 50 degrees Celsius when we were there. This is up in the mountains of Argentina. It's called Puya webriana, related to the pineapple. Many of these plants grow in very unusual environments. It does not necessarily, to my knowledge, produce an edible fruit, but it just goes to say that the extremes of plant adaptation on the planet are much more than tolerable than the crops that we just basically know. Here in the deserts of Chile, a fruit-bearing cactus called Eulychnia acida. That's really quite spectacular. And then a hallucinogenic fruit, which is called Gomarteca keule, growing on the coastal bluff areas of Chile. This was an expedition into Papua New Guinea, or actually West Papua in the island of New Guinea, for the largest banana, not size banana, but in fact the largest herbaceous or herb plant without woody stem in the world. The stem will get up to 15 meters before the leaves appear. It only grows in very strange valleys. This is me with an ethno-botanical twist, because the ladies of this part of Oman would chew up this plant called strigula, and they used it to dye their tongue purple to look beautiful. So I wanted to be beautiful, and it was for 4 days. This is the papaya family, and in the papaya family there's quite a few species which have never been domesticated. The potential for domestication is very exciting, and I'll see where the pictures unfold. Yeah, there's a lot of diversity in these pictures. They're jumping all over the globe. This is part of what I was fearing, but just keep going to read them. We'll just take people through and then I'll pick up again when I see some order coming. Okay, these are all desert plants that produce food in the desert. The leaves of all the apunti, of all the prickly pear, the last one, can be eaten as a vegetable, and they're actually delicious, and they have sustained people all over the deserts of Mexico and the desert southwest for thousands of years. So crops that need to be done. We have all kinds of fruits in the desert, including yucca. This is the plant in the background. This particular plant has a big, huge raceme full of dried fruits, which are about 3 or 4 inches long, that taste like the palm date. This is a fruit in the papaya family that grows on a tree that will withstand 8 months of drought a year with no water and produce these huge 14, 15-inch long fruits. This is in Madagascar, and this is an incredibly interesting tuber that I found in the southwest thicket forest of southern Madagascar. It's related to beans, but produces this huge edible tuber. And so I had seen a picture of this in a very obscure book. I got to Amphithini, which was the village, after 3 days of traveling on a potholed trail, and no one knew about it, and I kept asking and asking and asking. I found this little guy who said he knew where they were. So we drove another 25 miles out into the thicket, and him with his stick went around and pounded on the ground listening, and then excavated these. And it turns out we took these to Holland to one of the most profound thinking chefs of the day, and he said this was an amazing vegetable that he would love to work with, and yet it's in the wild and no one knows about it.
What year?
In southern Madagascar, southwest of Madagascar.
What year was it?
Oh, this is only about 5 years ago. So I was hauling this box up there to Holland. I take just big boxes, and they ask me what I'm doing with my stuff, and I say we're having food parties with chefs, and they let me in.
Yeah, you're lucky they let you in, actually.
They always let me in. I just declared it, and they look insane. So between the two, it goes. And you can go through this, and we got too many pictures and more excitement than we can handle. So here they are. The gores, these gemsbok cucumbers, they roast them, and then they break them open like an egg, and then they suck the insides out, which at that point become delicious and very edible. And there, again, that cucumber root. This is Raphiognathmi burkii. They get up to 25 to 30 pounds. And the natives dig them up as a source of water. You can eat the root too, but I mean, they chew them and they spit the fiber out for the water. And there we are digging up the marama bean, the sanpim. I felt like a giant there. This is an interesting plant. If any of you have a living cell phone that you can have internet on, look up Hedonora. Anyone here have one? Look at a few people, because then you can show the thing to your neighbor, because I don't have the picture of the flower, which looks like a vagina. That's why you're going to be interested in this, everyone. This is a very strange parasitic plant that grows in Africa, and it has these kind of trailing roots that are kind of thick, and then they eventually get to a plant, and like a vampire of the plant world, they have an attachment, so it just clings into the stem and then grows kind of roots in it. It's called the hostorium. It's kind of like the parasitic assemblage of this plant. And what it does, it flowers. You find it? Hydnora africana. And you bring up a picture of it and show the person next to you, and then they're all going to be wanting to see this.
Can you spell it again?
Hydnora. Hedonora africana. So a friend of mine had seen them in bloom. They're not forgettable. And then we went back and I found the immature fruit. Why do we want it? Because underneath...
Looks hilarious.
I'm not kidding him. Everyone wants to see it. HYD. Listen, this is as good as botany gets. If we actually wrote an article about this. HYDNORA. Now there's another one I'm going to give you. Unless I have a picture of it here. What? No, yeah, Clitoria is good.
It looks like that movie Teeth.
We have some, okay, you agree, right, Conley?
Yeah, but...
Okay. So, this is rock samphire in Greece. This is a member of the you know what rock samphire is, some of you, and it grows also in Great Britain. And here's my bean collection. So chicken, I know you're gonna go crazy because I have 1,500 varieties of beans, and this is just a part of them. First, we have different, wait a second, we have different species of beans. This happens to be the common bean, appropriately called Phaseolus vulgaris. And Phaseolus vulgaris comes from most likely Mexico, in the region south to Costa Rica, and then they made their way to South America, and then they made their way to Europe with the Spanish conquistadors taking them back to Charles V, who was the emperor of the era, then going to to Pope Clement VII. Yes, and who would then distribute them to monasteries, who would then get them all over Europe, and then they would go eastward to what is now Eastern Europe, and then into Central Asia. And the bean, therefore, conquered the world. Here I am with a lady in Michigan who is a tomato collector. I have lots of freaks among my entourage. Karen Golden has around 700 kinds of tomatoes, and that sounds pretty excessive. But I have a friend by the name of Neil Lockhart who lives in Oblong, Illinois. You know where Oblong, Illinois is? Jane? Or did she leave? Okay, well, Oblong, Illinois is just a little farming community, and what happens there is there's a guy by the name of Neil Lockhart, and he likes tomatoes, and I thought he would give me something profound as his reason for collecting tomatoes, but it was Forrest Gump-like. I said, so Neil, why did you start collecting tomatoes? And he looks at me real seriously, he says, frankly, I just like tomatoes. He has 5,500 different varieties in his collection. He keeps the seeds in baby food jars. Every year he raises between 300 and 500 varieties. He has them down artistically to the flavor, the taste, the leaf type, the productivity. He's a genius of tomatoes. And he's a pipe fitter too. Okay, so it turns out we also have a project which is called Gardens Across America. We send seeds all over the United States with the intent of them saving. Now, for the first year, I sent personal letters to these people, and I spent lots of time doing it. Again, another problem of trying to be personal. Turns out that send these super rare varieties, like the Ilogo Giant Peanut to this family, or Limbo, which is a type of cabbage growing in Ethiopia, or chocolate striped tomato, or Uriclahua giant corn, to Daniel Schrader at 135 Willow Ridge Road in Chuckee, Tennessee, and he grew all of them out, and I was surprised. He sent me a big batch of these back. The deal is, you send back 50% of the seeds so I can keep handing them out, and then you can give them to everyone else, and that is why we can save amazingly rare things. This is part of the diversity of corn. So I told my brother when he was in Peru, I said, you have to go to the Urubamba Valley, and I want you to collect land races as opposed to varieties. What do I mean by that? Varieties are generally named. Land races may be being grown by a single farmer who just keeps planting that same land race every year. So they may not even have specific names or whatever. It just depends on where and how people think of their food. Some people, like we went to Romania, with Irina looking for beans, and when I would ask what the name of it was, the bean, they'd say, it's a bean! They didn't give them names. But then if you go to some parts of the world, like Vietnam, they give everything a name, and hence you have a different perspective of how they appreciate or control nature. Next. This is some of the other bean collections we have. So what I've done is we've been looking for color variation. You would not expect it from the common bean that you eat as a baked food in a tomato slime every morning for breakfast. But the reality is they have extraordinary diversity. A lady in Italy, little grandmother up in Bergamo, Italy, she started sorting beans that had a blue tinge to them, and over the years she came up with beans that are as blue as sapphires. This right here is called Bomba from the Ukraine, Magpie from Tanzania. This right here, now known as Tiger Stripes, originated most likely in Peru, but then was found in other places. These were collected in Africa, these in the Republic of Georgia. This collection here coming from a Amish farmer in Tennessee, or where is he? Pennsylvania, yeah, an Amish farmer in Pennsylvania. This is bean collections from the Republic of Georgia. Interesting because the beans got there after Clement VII, made their way into these little mountain valleys, and because the people are saving their seeds over and over and again for centuries, they're similitudes to these beans, to the beans that were originally brought there hundreds of years ago. The hooked beans, which are called Kipfler beans from Austria. Again, beans don't originate there. And a blue variant that we've been selecting, and we now call this Ivan's blue bean, named after a friend of mine's child because it was his birthday. So we should name a bean for me. This bean right here, just pay attention to it. This is a collection of wild beans. Not really wild, but beans that were grown in Peru. Remember this one here because this right here is the same bean, but these are grown in Austria. So the original beans came from Peru, but after hundreds of years, they're still being grown in Austria. That tells you that biodiversity can also be preserved and maintained by us so-called gardeners. Here's my sister in Michigan growing out 300 varieties of rare beans. Here's me finding a bean that is jade color, which is, I found it at Fort Portal, Uganda. When I saw this bag of green-colored beans, I was blown away. Turns out a friend of ours by the name of W3, William Woys Weaver, is a food scientist and a food scholar in Devon, Pennsylvania. He's been studying all these origins, and he has German and Dutch roots. And he said, oh, I know where that bean comes from. Remember, I'm in Fort Portal, Uganda. How did it get there? Beans are not from Uganda. As you just heard, beans are from most likely Mexico and South America. So they get there after the Spanish Conquistador. Put the whole story together. Germans started breeding and selecting beans. They named one malachite. Know what malachite is? A green mineral. So it's named after the mineral. So they send the beans down to their colonies, and before long the Africans are cultivating beans. They love them. And 200 years later, the malachite bean still exists, no longer with a name. But that's where it came from. These were collected in Rwanda. There I am, selecting out beans in Rwanda. All the people looking at this big white monster collecting beans. And here I am handing out seeds in Rwanda. This is great because I was like collecting seeds in South America, giving them to people in Rwanda. And I said, I'm a part of the disruption. I'm going to do this. And here I am collecting beans in Ecuador. These people look at me when I go to their places and pick out beans for hours. And what's the matter with this person? This is a very interesting lima bean. Okay, lima beans are not from where this thing came from. This is from Yunnan province, China. We call it now the pink zebra, P-I-N-G, zebra bean. But lima beans come from Peru and Ecuador and Colombia. As you know, Chicken and Potley and George and Joe, the bean that I gave you, that gorgeous, beautiful yellow lima bean, comes from Colombia, the origin of where these came from. But getting to where they are, they changed their genetics, new manifestations, and we have something that neither exists in the New World nor in the Old World except for this variant. This is interesting. How many of you know fava beans? What do you call them? Fava beans?
Broad beans.
What? Broad beans. Okay, broad beans. So Vicia fava. How many of you seen a Vicia fava that looks like this? Okay, next one. How about Vicia fava that looks like this?
They look like rocks.
Okay, so you're going to see a few here. The point is, there's tan ones, there's brown ones, there's even a pink one with a variety from maybe Sutton's. Maybe it was Unwin's who introduced a pink variety, and then of course, you know, there's darker colored ones, but what I'm talking about is the fantangled looks and these fingerprints and these designs and these brilliant colors. They were manifestations that genetically appeared in the Andes, and these beans are from Europe, from the people who went that way, not the other way around. So these are new variants that came out of the environment there. Spectacular. Lupines. This is a lupine, but actually this is called Lupinus mutabilis, which is the chocho bean or the tar bean. Anyone familiar with it?
There she is.
Tarweed, chocho. Okay, next please. This is the Philodendron in Ancash in Peru. Really spectacular. This is some of the watermelon diversity that I have in our collection. So fleshes ranging from magenta to crimson red to orange yellow to orange to yellowish to yellow rind, red flesh, even white flesh melons. So they're all incredible watermelons. Next diversity. So then I'm collecting melons all over the world. This is Cucumis milo, what we also know as the rock melon or the cantaloupe melon. England itself was introduced to melons many hundreds of years ago. The French kind of influenced that because the French got them from Italy, Italy got them from Turkey, Turkey got them from the farther eastern expanses of Central Asia. Here's a variety that I collected in southern Armenia. This is along the Burmese border, just showing you some of the genetic diversity. This is in Barahona province in Dominican Republic. and this is in Armenia. This is in India. This is in India. This is in India, Chennai, India. They collected these. So I have seeds of a lot of these right here today. And then I collected these along the sides of the road. This is another kind of melon. Wait, go back, please.
Win the
These
melon
are
prize again,
very
Jim.
long, and they are not sweet. They're more starchy. What?
Like a marrow. Do you know what marrows are?
No, okay. They use them as a marrow, but this is a melon. So this is a starchy
Win the melon
fleshed
prize again
melon
with the new seeds.
used to cook in goulashes and in stews. That's how they use them there. And this is on an expedition to China to collect melons and seeds. It's a very
Joseph, man, I'm going to have to stop. I'm going to have to ask that we can do some questions, or at least like bring it to the temperate climates a bit more.
Okay,
Because that's the place where we can all make a difference here tonight. It's
Let's
so
do the pictures
interesting.
and then I'll tell you to stop when we have stuff that's good for them. Okay, this is very good. You guys are growing right now Cyclanthra pedata. You have seeds in this little tray I saw here. Cyclanthra pedata, we're going to see a picture of it. This is Cyclanthra brachystachys. This is a vegetable from the Andes, Peru and Ecuador and Colombia and Chile, that grow in the cooler mountain areas, but they surprisingly are extremely adaptable here. They have super delicious edible leaves, and also it's a wonderful vegetable for salads and for stuffing. Here's another species of Cyclanthra. I have seeds of this one too with me. And here's another one. And then this is the Cyclanthra pedata, which he has seeds right here. They're called lady slipper gourds. They're hollow with these little black seeds. This is another species from the tropics. Keep going through. Keep going. Okay, go back to that one. This is actually a cucumber. That's what I call a dinosaur egg cucumber. What happens is the skin on it, it's like the sea cucumbers. So what happens is as the brown matures and it starts bulging, the skin peels back and then it calluses underneath, giving this like dinosaur egg appearance. This is the next one. This is what I call a seven-sided cucumber, the heptagon giant, which I collected along the Burmese border. It could be particularly interesting for England and cold or moist places because it thrives and it doesn't get down in mildew. This is some of my cucumber growouts cucumber growouts for 2013, showing the diversity of ripe fruit of cucumbers. Okay, and this right here is a Mamordica fruit, which won't appeal to you, but I mean, keep going. You can't really grow that here. This is in Vietnam. They look like animal flesh inside of them. Keep going. Let me get on the other side here. Yeah, you see I have, okay, so let's talk about squash, because squash are a great vegetable to grow. This was collected in Peru. Peru, of course, is one of the centers of diversity of Cucurbita maxima, which includes Hubbard squash and banana squash, some of the giant super pumpkins. Keep going. There's arena at a pumpkin festival in Italy. These are Cucurbita moschata in Japan, the so-called Shishigatani superstar squash. This is in Taiwan. This is a 6,000-year-old variety from northern Peru called the Loche, L-O-C-H-E. This is these huge, these will do well here. This is Cucurbita maxima. They're called macre, and you'll see what's interesting about the flesh. It's bright yellow, the inside of it. This is an interesting variety that's from Bangalore, India. And then these are some of the collections of Peru that I made of these very unusual varieties of squash that we grow here.
Joseph, can we do questions and answers?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we've got half an hour left. And
I mean, I'll go longer if they want to.
I'm personally burning to ask a question. I'm sure loads of you guys are. Can I start?
Yeah.
All right, Joseph. I'm super inspired about your idea of population. The population problem not being that there's too many people, but that we don't have enough gardens. And in your words, that we're all potentially giant earthworms. What I would like to ask you is, what kind of development can you envision that would need to happen in order to bring about a future where humans could live in harmony with and beneficial relationship with all of these incredible plants?
Yeah, I'm getting good at this question because it's asked over and over again, because there's a detachment from reality, proposed solutions, and people want to have some type of packaged solution because that's how we think. We think digitally. We want to be explained how to be a solution. No, the way to be a solution is first this, and I've thought about it a lot of times. Why am I showing you all of these things? Because this is pornography. This is absolutely extraordinary. It's plant porn. And this is to incite a ravenous curiosity in you that if this clicks into you, no one can take it away. No one can take this away from me until I have a lobotomy. And I keep running from that. So the thing is, with curiosity, you're continuously opening new doors that never existed because you're finding something, and as you amass information, you aren't any longer making a digitalized review of your knowledge. You're starting to grow like a spider web, or you're starting to grow like a different kind of network. That's kind of what social media is doing, but we need to take that curiosity and spread it that same way. When you show somebody who screams in utter delight at yellow and black flaked lima beans, you know you're touching base. But the point is, we can all have that kind of curiosity. Curiosity is the beginning of it, and once you have that, even convenience may fall by the wayside because I want to have all these spectacular plants in my garden and I want to give them to the people next door and I want to teach them how they can use that barren piece of ground and start seeing all the things that soil can do.
What kind of infrastructure would that need?
Simple. This is the other thing, okay? Let's stop pretending to need massive restructuring of things. You just start from the simplest first. So the simple solution is just start planting plants. Plant everything that you can imagine. In your reclaiming of these grounds, the diversity will lead to supplying curiosity because you can go through and let people taste things. It's kind of what we were talking about with children and how to inspire children. You're interested in this topic. You want to bring your question into this because I think it ties in.
It is related, but yeah, what else can we do with children to inspire them apart from having...
Curious George, you know the book? So I say that all the time, and it's starting to get a little mundane because they say it all the time, but I realize the audience is hearing it new, and it's, even though it sounds like something stupid, it's incredibly important. If you're just stuck on a little machine, you know, the machines are very good, but you probably would have been surfing around for a very long time, everyone, without knowing that Hedonora africana exists. So knowledge, information, experience then translates into allowing you to ask new questions and create new things and relate to people in an ever exponential way. So when you start kids on this, we say at once they are in connection with nature because they kind of feel it, but they're not attached to nature because they play in gadgets all day long. So how do you reconnect them? I just show them this.
Link with the fucking screen.
Just show them, right? Curiosity. Next question.
Are there any plants, I mean you've mentioned a number of things.
And I do practical things. I'm bringing a whole box of seeds here.
Is there anything else that you would think of as a plant to throw out there for like a guerrilla garden project that you could literally...
Oh, well, let's go through some more pictures. You want to flick through them? Flick through them and I'll pick that and then who wants, yes,
Yeah.
okay. So just flick through the pictures and I'll stop when it happens and then let's hear the next question. Next question?
I've got a question about avocado alternatives.
Avocado alternatives?
Why do you use avocado alternative?
One of the development managers, Sarah, was horrified to find out that it takes 272 litres of water to grow 2 to 3 farmed avocados. And compared to how they used to be harvested in forests, that was like an environmental crime. And she wants to know what kind of fruits could fill the dietary gap of avocados people here and if they exist.
It's less than beef for a start.
That's a hell of a question.
Does it take into account count rainfall there? Because quite often those figures don't count the rainfall.
Good question, yeah, good point.
So we want an avocado alternative for England?
Yes, because
Next
they
week.
won't be importing them anymore because they're not even getting to the places where they're grown. Because it's all messed up.
Let me think here for a few minutes as we go through this.
Not avocado advocates.
But can I just say something? I think what's happened is, like, this paleo is really, really popular. If you Google paleo food,
Sorry, I'm not hearing what you said.
That's why everyone's eating avocado. Because it's like,
Avocados and toast, huh? But they have a lot of good fatty acids in them, and avocados are really quite fascinating. I mean, the story about the dispersion is even more so. keep going.
Oh, that's another question I've got.
Yes.
To answer the second question. Do you believe that there's two things? The first thing is, should we abandon our main crops, or do you see a combination of the staples that we're growing now and the selection of wild food coming online? So that's the first one. The second one is, should we be importing food at all, or should we completely be eating things that grow indigenously?
Okay, now they're both perfect. So the first thing is, why throw the baby out with the bathwater? There's the only thing that has happened with the major crops that exist is that we whittled down their diversity. If you look at most of the soybean profiles that are being grown in the United States, you can probably limit them to 10 or 15 strains now. There are actually, in the United States Department of Agriculture's gene bank collection in Champaign-Urbana, Illinois, over 13,000 accessions. When I sit there and talk to Randall, who is the curator of that collection, this guy will vehemently say that they're not productive, that they aren't as interesting as before, but yet this magnificent collection is being tended by the United States Department of Agriculture. But at the same time, its protectors disclaim its value and use, which is a strange aberration. To me, in having accessed those things, there's approximately 400,000 accessions in the United States Department of Agriculture's food bank, of which very few are used. And they've tried to go through and they've done genetic markers, they test for this oil, that oil, this and stuff, but the fact is they don't have much variety. I say we take those crops, we start planting variety, and then we do intercropping, which then becomes a resilient ecological system rather than a destructive one, referring back to the onset of agriculture as proposed by Houston von Liebig, who happens to be the father of fertilizer, who started that whole substance.
So it's also about the fact that we're growing them in monocultures.
Yes, absolutely. But I mean, it's using very few crops, which also makes it very dangerous. I mean, people have the patent example of the potato blight and how it wiped out Ireland and then how it spread to other places because they were growing 1 or 2 clones of a potato that all succumbed at the same time to the same blight. Next.
When you were in Madagascar, did you see much deforestation?
Much deforestation.
Yeah, because I hear it's
they
really...
burned most of the place away. Again, this is not...
When you look at it from space, you can see like all the soil running away into
it's the same thing. So it's going out to sea, it's washing that blood red soil and everything right out to sea. But it's, again, not too many, there's not too many earthworms there. It's just the ones that are there are really treating things really stupidly. If you cut down a tree, plant 2 more because you're going to need them.
Are you finding as you travel that it's... in my personal experience, I found like you go with idealistic ideas, you know, all these wonderful things that they're going to be the keepers of the forest, and they often aren't. They're the ones cutting down these trees.
They're the ones who value at least. Okay, so in Papua New Guinea, for example, it's romanticized to think that nowadays that I am going and experiencing this euphoria of discovery via the people who live there. Okay, it's not that way. It's not like they're fountains of information passed because as soon as they get a television or a satellite dish, which you can find in the most bizarre places on little shacks that have dirt floors, they give up everything that they have because they want to be modern. So in that race forward, they lose everything else. So I was in New Guinea and going into the forest with these guys who were, 20 to 30 years old, and their reliability in terms of information about what was in their forest was almost nil. They had a few things that they knew, but if they were a city, if they were now a city dweller, they had almost lost everything because these oral traditions are passed down from generation to generation, and they end up losing them. Even though I'm showing you this extraordinary diversity in photographs, if I were to go to markets, there's a real keen effort on my part to separate the wheat from the chaff because you will go around the world, including Madagascar. Madagascar is particularly desolate in this realm of having Eurocentric introduced vegetables. That doesn't mean they're all from Europe, but many of them are, such as carrots, such as cabbage, such as broccoli and cauliflower, and then via Europe, potatoes and tomatoes and lychees and things like that. So you see this reductionism of what they used to eat, which means over the world it's becoming even more and more homogenized, and it's fitting well into the agendas of those super companies that are growing. Just think recently of the mention that Monsanto was being purchased by Bayer, which is now going to be the world's largest conglomerate food company, now controlling what, 25% of the world's food supply. So they are seeing this fall into their schema. The only disruptors that they're not counting on is that there's us. And we're going to be really bad disruptors because we're going to make people feel like shit because they missed out on so much. And now you're dumb because you aren't curious, right? That's the message.
And do they take that on board and start listening to their grandparents or parents then?
No, they don't. They don't want to be like them. That's the problem.
It's Nike,
That's the problem.
Over and over, Coca-Cola and TV. It's the same thing as we have. Why would we not? We messed up on the way here. And we look at them and go, their land is green, and they're like, well, I want the convenience. So who are we to say, you know, what one system's better
It's
than the
social
other?
engineering though, because what you're saying, guys.
It's social engineering, absolutely.
20 years ago in India, they gave everyone free satellite television to get them on advertising.
Absolutely. That's the trick of the drug dealer too, right? Give them a little taste of drugs for free.
But it's also really interesting because food has a cultural aspect. I care for a West Indian family in London. Now these people, I mean, some of them are second generation and the mother's there, but they go down the market and they buy imported West Indian vegetables. They, you know, at twice the price, we've got a very good local market selling produce produced in Lincolnshire. They're not interested because culturally the food they grew
Okay,
up
so
on.
this is another big element that we are addressing when it comes to food, and it's a relatively important one because I can give you an example from the Kamboni sisters in Ethiopia. They said that in order to try to convince people to eat who are starving, they had to give them things that they were used to eating, and they wouldn't eat things that they didn't know. That just is baffling to me. You're sitting there dying of starvation and you won't eat? And she said they're almost that bad. And so this is a part of the culture.
Picks up the last one, fine.
Yeah, I had all kinds of humanitarian aid projects in Mexico. We were planting different colored beans.
Yeah, Joe, the last
and they
recording
would
came out
rip
fine.
them out and throw them away. And I said, why are you doing this? They said, we don't eat red beans. We only eat black
But
ones.
they raised them, so they put all the effort into watering.
And they were
them,
loaded.
protecting
They were loaded with
And then
beans.
they trash them, because they don't need that much there.
We don't eat red beans. We eat black beans.
Isn't that the definition of land growth? You know, when a family's got the same type of being for generations, they eat that kind of meat.
Yes, but there's also, I mean, land race, yes, but there's an impoverishment in stupidity that's exceptional. So they are accepting modern work and they're making money to buy products, say, from Bimbo Corporation, which is selling, you know, like a little bag of potato chips. So then what they do, they used to have what we call kitchen gardens in their backyards and stuff. That's how the tradition was. And as they advanced, they would make a little more money. So now what they do with their kitchen garden is they throw the plastic garbage in the back and burn it. And it's just a garbage pile. So instead of having the benefits of the past and including them with the benefits of the modern life, they've now thrown out the past, and they have, in my sense, of appreciation and impoverishment because of that, because they're eating less nutritious food than they were before. They have a little more financial recourse, but it's like a cycle that's dead-ended.
Money runs the world.
Something we did in England, 100 years ago, you know, we got off the land and got these cushy jobs before convenience and lost that.
We're modest, but that's by making fashionable or cool certain types of foods, you're also promoting them in the areas they came from. A very interesting example is the quinoa one that I was going to bring in. Everybody thinks that in South America they're no longer consuming quinoa because the Westerners are importing it all. So I had the opportunity to speak to a number of Bolivian farmers at this so-called International Symposium on the Quinoa. It was the year of the quinoa under the UN. They organized this big event. So they were telling us that in the 70s and 80s, rich families in the cities of Bolivia would have not touched quinoa because it was poor people's food. It was actually a tradition that was completely getting obliterated by modernity. But because it has now become a superfood, their interest in it has also raised. Yes, they can afford it, but now they want to grow it and they also want to consume it. So that's quite ironic, and I think that for all our faults as Westerners, quote unquote, we have also initiated a path that could lead to the restoration of some of these crops and traditions around the world. And it's not in any case of the quinoa, there's actually hope with so many other things. We were in Atacama, and there was this French lady who had established a restaurant based on native foods. Her reason was, of course, commercial. She had no moral agenda, but she wanted to make a profit. So because tourists were eating all these obscure things, she made the people start raising them. She started by forage products, and then the people started raising them in small plots. So I think it's a mixed discussion on what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong. And I don't think we have to be fatalistic.
I wanted just to continue on with this. I work in Ecuador, and so much.
In Ecuador?
Yeah.
Where?
I work in La Jolla, on the border of Colombia in
the north.
In the Amazon.
Yeah.
Yeah. But obviously, I have a lot of friends that live in the Andes as well, and so quinoa is mainly grown for export. You would never see quinoa cooked as we cook it, like a rice, an alternative to rice. You will never ever see that in Ecuador. It is only put in soup because it's so much more expensive. So it's much cheaper to buy rice. They can't afford to buy quinoa, to have a nice plate of quinoa. That's never going to happen because they know it's really nutritious, but because it's so expensive and it's totally for export, they will just put a tiny handful of it in soup. And that's really how it's
there's a certain reality to that, but it was a declining crop, immeasurably declining in Ecuador, in a few enclaves in Colombia, hugely in Peru and hugely in Bolivia. It was just diminishing. It was becoming an endangered crop. So 30 years ago, as one of our friends explained it, the only people who knew about were a few vegan lesbians because he was trying to narrow it down to that small of a group. And that's how little known it was outside
because
that.
everybody grows rice. Why grow quinoa when you can grow so much more rice? So much.
No, but they're not growing. Okay, so you're in the lowlands in Amazonia up there?
No, I'm talking about the Andes.
No, but where are you? Okay, so you have the plateau over on this side and it dries up there where the Green Lakes are. At what altitude are you there?
That can go up to like 4,000.
But the area where people are living is between 2,000 and 3,500 where you're talking about quinoa production.
Yeah.
So,
but I mean, now we're growing quinoa here in England.
Yeah, it's going to be grown all over the world. Yeah, everywhere. No, we're growing everywhere.
It also depends on how people organize in different communities. One of the groups that was present at that symposium was Bolivia. And they were saying that they have an internal rule within their community that they can only sell that much of what they produce. They can only sell, let's say, 70% or 80%. And the rest they have to consume internally or throw away if they don't want to consume it. But they're not allowed to sell it, they're allowed to export it. And also with the revenue, instead of having somebody that tells them what to do with it, let's say they pay taxes and they build infrastructure, they decide within their own group how they want to invest the money that's coming from the export of quinoa. So I think that's a good model that could possibly be studied by the community you're in.
Thanks. Can I just share something? I'm just really inspired by the food that's just come out of the kitchen. I just want to say one thing. It's like a quote that I had in mind when I was contemplating Joseph, and what this is all about. Like Mike Poland says, monocultures on the plate leads to monocultures on the land. You know, this idea that with our diets, like everything we've just been saying, we're creating the monocultures that are causing the destruction of our planet. So on that note, Dan has just created these. What are they, Dan?
Well, because Joseph's an ethno-botanist, that's very earthy, I decided to go outer space. And these are buckwheats and tapioca spaceships, crowned by hipster rose hips and beetroot with some crab apples, fermented honey and lemon, with transmitters of nettle seeds. And there's not probably enough for everyone.
I'm going to get mine before that.
So get, if you can, or I oblige you to share.
Thank you.
They're pretty good.
Tastes good, bro.
Next question? Kate, right?
Yes. You're going to get such good positive feedback.
Yes.
From memory, it's amazing. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Why are there... I don't know very much about vegetables and things, but why are there beans? Why don't you just soak them? Why do they have poisonous properties unless you soak them?
Yeah, what beans are we talking about?
Other beans that are...
Well, okay.
You can pop them.
Okay, no, but we'll go through it. So there are toxic properties to beans. If you were to eat a lot of raw kidney beans or raw lima beans, some of them have so much cyanide in them that they can actually be deleterious, maybe even poisonous. But I mean, like those yellow, black ones you have back there, they would probably have higher levels of cyanide in them.
Yay!
But when you cook it, it dissipates the cyanide, so there's no problem there. But there's many different kinds of beans, and in fact, one of them here...
He's trying to kill us already.
No, none of the beans there that I have are those kind of beans, but you wouldn't want to eat a bunch of raw, mature kidney beans that hadn't dried yet. Kidney beans, when you cook them, of course, they're completely harmless.
It's just supermarket health food, basically.
Yeah.
But you know, the other thing you haven't mentioned is sea vegetables.
Oh, well, I mean, that's another whole world. I mean, we were just up in Holland, and we went to the Friesem herbarium, and they had a herbarium collection of sea vegetables. And we were just talking about that yesterday. They were working on a project in Holland where they're trying to grow sea vegetables, and we're a part of that. It's too much. Like, these are all relatives of the tomato, which could be grown here in England, to my estimation. They're called hull tomatoes, and no one has ever worked on any of them. And there's over, again, strangely consequential, the number 60 plus species growing in the valleys of Peru, the mountains of Central and South America.
It looks a little like Physalis.
Yeah, it does look very much like Physalis or Physalis, and I mean, of course, it's a very closely related plant, but they're just gorgeous flowers and beautiful edible fruit.
Can I ask a question about
Rachel, right?
Yes, about invasive species and also importing.
Who's the most invasive species of all, I always point out? Beans.
Well, human beings. I mean, Australia, they will fine you into next week.
Yes, of course, but they go through my boxes and they sit there and spend hours and everything, and they never get anything because they just don't know where it is. I mean, when I describe that, the human stomach can hold so many seeds. One of the best examples that I have of this is I had a friend who was a tomato breeder, and he was showing me all these marvelous Michelangelo tomato creations. And he said, you cannot save the seeds, but you can eat as many as you want. So you can't take any seeds out. So I ate as many as I wanted, and then I did what was natural for an elevated primate. I cleaned my excrement of the seeds, and I got tons of seeds. So that's how they actually come out.
It's better than putting it on your bum.
Renegade.
Edible seaweeds are there?
Of edible seaweeds, I would say over 500.
Just put it up your bum more. Stick it right up.
UK, pretty much all of them.
Pretty much all of them.
Yo, this is young.
Yeah, probably do, yes.
That sounds like real fun. What are your thoughts on squamish grains and like phytic acid?
Yeah, black here.
To get rid of the phytic acid, sprouting grains eliminates that, doesn't it? So it already is a perfect approach.
That's not it.
Well, it looks like we're definitely just setting up camping in this building.
In some cases. In fact, there's a dispute as to
Stop calling me back.
the phytic acid, there's so much calcium available in those grains, whether it's actually significant enough to actually block, whether it is an anti-nutritional or not, is actually in debate. As someone who eats grains, I just like to...
Or whether we're just having too limited of a diet. I mean, I change my diet daily. Like, I haven't eaten any baked beans until I got here. And by the time I get back to Italy, there'll be no more baked beans.
And what about apple seeds? You know, that seems quite controversial. I know people that actually swear that you must eat the apple seeds. Whereas
Yeah,
other
but
people
you'd
are
have to
saying...
eat at least a half a cup of them to get enough cyanide to be detrimental.
Well, it's the same as the elderberries, you know, that are on the canopy. So the cyanide.
The dosage, isn't it?
Anyone? Can I interest anyone in canopy?
Keep going through these, so just to get the pictures of things they want to learn about it.
Unless it's got extra cyanide on it, I'm alright.
Especially for you.
Alright.
I have a question.
Yes?
Hi. When you're in a room that isn't like this kind of room where everybody's interested in diversity, when you're in a room full of, standard crop scientists, where do you even start the conversation?
Oh
How
my
can we
gosh,
start
these guys
that
are itching in their pants, their darts are ready, the bullets, I mean, you can't believe it. I was invited to speak at the University of Southern Connecticut in the state of Connecticut in the United States, and one of the professors who attended was a, what do they call him? We call him a shield, or was a mole from Monsanto who was sitting in there, and she started going through things, and she got to the point where she got up and she stormed out of the things, and then she went and told the people who invited me to the program that I was anti-academic, and that I was possibly introducing pathogens by giving the free seeds out to the students. So I did something which was not particularly ethical, but I had a bunch of people do research on her, and then I posted all of her corporate posts and everything on my Facebook page, and I had like hundreds and hundreds of, it was inflammatory. But she went and told that kind of stupid stuff about me, so I lost my cool on that one.
Hey.
So have you never been invited to work on any kind of regeneration or conservation kind of projects?
Yeah,
or
in fact,
I don't know.
Chicken says he heard about me through Jeff Lawton. And Jeff Lawton and I are working presumably on a project of restoration of 300 acres in Malaysia.
So
these are all papaya relatives here, by the way.
As someone who hates the word permaculture, how do you go about that kind of regeneration?
Yeah, we gotta come up with a better word. We really.
Is it?
It sounds like permaculture. It just sounds bad. It sounds bad.
I need a better word.
Yeah, but it's just like
plant stuff.
It isn't sexy enough.
But it's not plants. It's not just plants. It's people. It's the whole shebang.
That's a papaya relative. All of those are papaya relatives.
Have you worked much with alley cropping? Because we're in Ecuador, one of the projects we did this year was we just grew 4,000 Inga edulis.
Inga edulis?
Yeah, and we put them in alleys to do alley cropping, showing about improving soil conditions. So I wonder if you've got any.
So you're talking about the ice cream bean type of thing?
Yeah.
Okay, because another bean that I really am delighted with, I may have a picture of it here, is Erythrina edulis. Are you familiar with it? Perote? Big, huge brown bean. We have it here, perhaps. So let me just talk about this one for a second because it's particularly relevant. So scientists are very important to me, and specialists are very important. You go back a couple of things, go back to where I was slogging through the mud. Right there, okay. So this is a good story. So I have a monograph. A monograph is a write-up on a specific genus of plants, in this case, a relative genus of plants that are related to papayas. And in that monograph, there is a species known as Vasconcelia paulandensis. Paulanda is in southern Ecuador, and it's in this kind of terrain, and it's a little town that's surrounded by jungle mountains. So the farmers there have cleared the forest so they can have cattle fields. And so what they do is they run up and down these singular trails with their cattle, but it rains almost every day of the year there, so it is an absolute mire, quagmire. And so I have this guy here who's from Lima, Peru, who is my contract driver when I'm in Ecuador and Peru. He's driving me all over the place, and he wanted to go up the mountain. So he's wearing city slicker clothes. He had like patent leather black shoes. He had a pair of pressed trousers and his t-shirt. So by the time he was done, he had ripped his pants out, his shoe fell apart, and he was like, the mud would, you sink down every single time, 3, 4, 5, 8 inches. He said, I will never go again with you. So we walked up this thing all the way up the mountain, and then the goal was to find this papaya. So this monograph, this scientific report on these species, and he said it's the rarest papaya in the world. I said, I have to find it. So I sat there asking people, and I found this farmer who said he knew it. So let's go through this arena. Next. No, next. So we get up to the top of the mountain, and I found it. Here's the plant right here. Here's one unripe fruit, and here's another one. That verifies that first I got to the plant on the mountain, and that it was there. But we had no ripe fruit. I wanted seeds. So the farmer, next one, here's the plant again from another view. There's the unripe fruit. There's the terrain. There's the farmer. Go back. There's Sergio right there, he's the cow farmer. So he had known about the plant. So we go back down, and so I asked him, I said, Sergio, can you go back up tomorrow? Because he goes up every day for his cows. And he said he would go up and try to find me a fruit. So the next day, Sergio comes back, and here's what he's got. He's got 2 of them. Absolutely raw, ripe fruit. I'm absolutely ecstatic. Next, I'm going around with the 2 examples I have, driving through terrain like this, asking everyone I can find if they've ever seen this fruit. Finally, I get to a young man. Next, please. Get to a young man who says, yes, he knows it, and he's on a motorcycle, and I said, well, come to my hotel tomorrow morning. I said, if you can give me a bag of them, I'll pay you a really good price. So I'm thinking, oh yeah, this is just another bunch of BS. A young guy trying to say he has something, because I go through this hundreds and hundreds of times, because as much as this is curiosity, it's also being a detective, it's also being a social investigator. And so the young man goes off, I give him my camera, I said, when you get up there, take lots of pictures. So finally the day comes and goes, he comes at 7 o'clock in the morning, picks up the camera. I get to his house the next night, and I said, did you find him? And he brings me out, I'm not kidding, about a 5-stone bag of these fruits.
Wow.
This is like so amazing. This is the rarest plant of its kind in the world, of the Spaya. And so he showed me these pictures. Here. Wow. Next, please. So what it is inside it has 5 segments. It tastes like a mandarin orange. Here I'm collecting the seeds because I wanted to disperse them all over the world. And then I get to this scientific meeting in Holland, and a guy comes up to me, he says, I'm one of the authors of that. He says, how did you find this? And he said, we had a whole team and we could only find 1 or 2 fruits. I said, well, that's my job. And so, and then I told him, I said, it won't be rare anymore because it'll be growing all over the world. So this is the strange other part of my life. I get seeds, I give them to people, I sell them to people, and I distribute them because my idea is that if we share this stuff, it won't be being lost. First of all, they're cutting them down because they want cow pastures up there. Talk about the ignorance of the people. So the ignorance is they are often the ones who are thinking along the lines of conventional agriculture, of what they can do to make money. In this case, cattle herding. So they chop down these precious rainforests that are laden with treasures like this because no one has ever taught them the value of this over the value of what they're doing. What are some of the possible values? Well, for the pharmaceutical industry, you see this kind of white gelatinous thing. This is a type of enzyme called paparin. Paparin is used in accent meat tenderizers from papaya. It's an anti-cancer element. It tenderizes meat, but it also has all kinds of uses in chemistry and medicine. So they could be raising these super paparin-rich fruits instead of cutting down their rainforest, but they're just getting rid of them. So my idea is that we need to share these resources, which brings in a whole other subject matter, which goes into onion skin layers, about whether or not we should give benefits to these people for this kind of thing, which they don't actually value anyway. I mean, they're chopping them all down in the rainforest. And I mean, often, if they were educated about this, they would start being able to do so. But in my own capacity, in my little world right now, I can't go and educate these people other than the fact that they see this crazy man getting all excited and jumping up and down about fruit. They say, well, there must be something to it because he came all the way here, he has a car, and he has everything. Why is he doing it? Keep going, please. I'm doing it to save the world. That's what my mentality is. Next. So there's the segments of it. We can keep going. So all over the world, people are doing this kind of stuff, and they're losing this diversity. Like, for example, this fruit right here is in the papaya family. I found that guy via his brother who took me to his house, and I told him about the fruit. He takes me to a tree. We find 1 fruit. I say, go back the next day. He brings me a whole box of them. I start spreading them around to people all over the world. I have the seeds in my box right now. This is what I keep doing, thinking that I'm somehow introducing things that no one else is seeing. The scientists did not like this. He didn't like it because, number one of their things is their importance is based upon how rare the thing they're working with is. Some bastard comes along and spreads the seeds to everyone. I mean, our air is gone. And so that brings a strange consequence of so-called conservation because it's over and over again proven that the authorities or the intelligentsia actually want things to be rare because in that way they're more important. Think of the wallaby pine, which was discovered in Australia. It happens to be that the wallaby pine was this prehistoric pine that was just raging with news about how they were going to conserve it. They got 50,000 seeds, planted it, were growing the seedlings out, but they didn't have any place to get rid of them in a way that would have kept the plant important, so they plowed them under. This is the way things are happening all over the world. And when people tell me about conservation, my argument is very clear. The reason that flowering plants have been so successful at colonizing planet Earth is because of superabundance. Look at it. This is one fruit that I'm eating, hundreds and hundreds of seeds. Why does nature do that? Because one of those seeds, or two of them, may germinate. Some of them get eaten up, some of them decay, some of them are stepped on. Whatever the case, nature knows that superfluous production is necessary to procreate its species. So we, as the giant earthworms, come along and we can take those seeds, and with our know-how, we can grow hundreds of those plants. So there's not a real reason for most flowering plants to be in danger of extinction. Yes?
Do you think that the internet has like facilitated ignorance in people, like, and the convenience, like people just get the one convenience, they just watch stuff on the internet and they just rather like live away from it than go out and actually do
Before I
something?
think about answering that, let me think about this. Because one of the subjects that's important to realize here, and some of you should have these sensibilities, or at least you're fermenting them in your mind, thinking, well, do you have a right to go and get this stuff and share it with other people? I say I do, because if I go to Ecuador, and you pointed it out very clearly in your discussion, they eat rice. Rice does not come from Ecuador. And guess what? Neither does carrots, neither do carrots. So some things come from Ecuador, and we're using them, but they likewise are using our things. So it is rather hypocritical for them to say, oh, you can't use Hackeratsia spinosa because it's our food. Well, stop eating everyone else's food because you're eating an awful lot of it. And this is the point all over the world, which gives me the open policy of saying we have to share genetic resources of all food plants. That does not mean we have to pretend we own them, which is now a patenting and biopiracy discussion, but it means to share them. Oof, I can keep going for a long time.
Thank you. I want to say that we've got like 15, 20 minutes left till we're meant to vacate this building.
Oh, but we have to vacate the building.
9 o'clock is the time we were given permission to be open.
That's what makes it.
But like, I would just like to say that the last 10, 15 minutes we could do to like saving seeds and talking about saving seeds.
Okay, well thank you.
Let's go!
There's a gardener who wants to grow something next year. Yeah, you're included. You would like to grow.
Let's go and see.